career, figure out their career, out where to go to school, and maneuver this whole complicated, complex process that's been made even more complex since I was in school for sure. But I'm so happy to have Matt Leahy with me, and he is going to talk to us about his experience and his journey to become what he currently does as a design manager. So, Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing.
Sure, absolutely. So currently, I work at a technology consultancy, and I work within the customer experience team, working primarily with our designers on what's known as digital accessibility. So making sure that the websites and apps that we produce are usable by the widest range of users, and with a specific focus on users with disabilities. So that's my specific area of focus. More broadly, I've spent my career working in different respects around the areas of web design and development. So I went to VCU and studied communication arts. So a little bit of an interesting path that I took. I started out studying art. So communication arts at VCU is graphic design and illustration. So I went to school thinking that I was going to be illustrating comic books or children's books or that sort of thing. So, my program was a big emphasis on drawing and painting and that sort of thing. And one of the great things about college is you get exposed to a lot of different areas of focus, different industries, different types of occupations. And the way that manifested for me was I got more exposed to graphic design initially. So, I'd always been a creative person, had always enjoyed art and creating art. But I was exposed to graphic design as a discipline, which is, creating, using art to communicate is the way I would describe it. So whether that's designing print pieces like posters and brochures, designing logos, or designing web pages, or anything like that. It's taking those creative skills, but applying them to a specific purpose to communicate and do a job. And that really suited me better than, what I initially thought I was going to focus on.
Well, what's so
Because
interesting to me, Matt, is
yeah,
you knew you were creative, and you knew you wanted to do something creative, and then here you are doing all of this, using all of that creativity in a career where you actually have this skill and you've developed this skill, and I think this is a huge, you know, uh, career. It's a growing career, for people that are just looking at college and going to college and trying to figure out what they're going to do for the rest of their life. So I love the way that you married creative and technology together. So,
yeah, absolutely. And that's what really resonated with me was, um, I've always enjoyed problem solving, and so I liked, that I could apply my creative skills to solving a specific problem with constraints. And so, you know, graphic design really appealed to me, and I really enjoyed it. And then, I layered on uh, a little bit later on, um, more of a technical component to it. So I learned coding. I took a class at VCU to get my feet wet with coding. Had an internship where I was able to learn a little bit more, and then from there, really kind of self-taught what's called front-end development, which is coding HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Basically, the code that underlies everything that you see visually on a screen when you're looking at a
mhm.
website. So I loved all of that, and that really struck that sweet spot for me personally, where I could kind of switch between the right and left sides of my brain. I could think creatively, create visual layouts, work with imagery and color and all of that, but also think very technically, and actually think about how I was going to program and code these things that I was designing.
So do
Um,
you think that the coding class that you took, and then you took it a step further and actually did an internship, how much did that impact your skill set and just your marketability, after college?
Yeah, it was huge. I think that there are tons of different areas of focus in the design space and in the digital space. There are visual designers who really focus on that area. There are UX designers who think more strategically about the experience. There are developers, of course, but having a broad exposure and having an understanding of even if you're not going to code as your career, having an understanding of how those things work and how they impact the experiences that you're designing, it's critical. And then for me, it was something that I actually embraced more and really kind of pursued in parallel um, both tracks, and was able to find great roles in my career where I was able to do both of those jobs.
So, what do you find the most challenging, whether it be in this current position that you're in or previous positions, in this area of expertise? What are the challenges that you face?
Yeah, I think it's probably some of the things that um, going into this career initially you wouldn't necessarily think about. It's not the design, it's not the technical challenges, it's the people aspect. So some of the most challenging things are working with, whether it's your client or your stakeholders at your organization, understanding what people are looking to accomplish, and helping to ask good questions to understand what the goals for a project are, and kind of translate those to the designs that you're producing. It's collaborating with others. So you're never working in isolation as a designer. You're working with copywriters, and you're working with developers, and you're working with project managers. And so you have to be highly collaborative. You have to be able to communicate really well, both to work together with people, also to present your ideas. There is an important skill set with what we do, where you need to be comfortable getting up in front of somebody and explaining, you know, why you made the decisions you did, helping people understand why the design was produced the way that it was. So there's a lot more to it than just getting into your design software and producing a layout. The people aspects are really challenging, and from what I've seen, I think those are really what separate the really successful individuals from the not. It's the people that can make good connections and work well with other people, and communicate their ideas really clearly, in addition to producing really stellar work.
Mhm. Well, so much I think comes down to communication, really across the board in any career, and just being able to, have good presentation skills and present your ideas and so forth. So I think that's, probably part of your strength too, is, being the creative and then having the technical and then having, the presentation skills. So all three, it's like a trifecta, Matt.
Yeah,
You've got the
and I
trifecta.
think you get that from most art programs, design programs, at college. There's obviously a big emphasis on the art and design fundamentals and principles, and a big emphasis on developing those skills. But you spend a lot of time too in critique. You spend a lot of time presenting your work to your peers, um, you know, explaining your ideas, and also hearing from other people. And uh, you know, it's another challenge, or I think an important skill set to have in this career, is being able to take critique, and take it
Mhm.
not as not take it personally, but take it as a way to improve yourself and improve the work you're producing. That's not always an easy thing, and it's a muscle you build. Certainly, I think through most art and design programs in school.
So you kind of have to develop kind of a tough skin to be able to, you know, to take that critique and maybe, use it in a good way. So for fair balance, you talked a lot about the good and fun things. What is the, like, the downside, or things to avoid, watch out for? What's and also what's a day in the life of you know What do you do
Yeah.
every day?
I definitely wouldn't call it a pitfall, but I think it is something to be aware of, and that is that this is an industry that's fast moving. It's driven by technology. The things that we're producing are accessed on, consumed on technology, and are sort of based upon the capabilities of that technology. And as those change, the way you go about your job needs to change. So it's a job where you have to be comfortable with and excited about constantly learning. Um,
If you don't like change, this might not be the right direction for you
that's
because
exactly right.
technology, it's amazing where we've evolved to, and there's so much technology you probably know that I have no idea about, that it just keeps moving. So
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. I mean, I graduated VCU in 2009 and started doing this as a career. And the iPhone was pretty brand new at that point. We didn't even have iPads yet. And so I can say very confidently the way I do just about every aspect of my job today is completely different than it was when I first started, in terms of the design best practices and the coding languages, and all of the devices we have to test on. It's all completely different. And that's a challenge, but it's also a lot of fun. It's never dull. There's never not something new to kind of sink your teeth into, um, and learn more about, or get better at.
well, and that brings up a great question that I have, and that is, how are you learning new things? Do you, take classes? Do you, how do you keep learning?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess first and foremost, one of the great things about the design and digital space is that there is just a plethora of great information, great resources, and great people out there, that with some quick googling, is right at your fingertips. So there are tons of people in this industry that are self-taught. I mentioned earlier that I took kind of a little bit of a curvy path, to get to doing the work that I'm doing, and that's very common. There are a lot of people that do what I do that didn't necessarily study design in school, or like I did, learned the coding, uh, on the side by reading articles and taking classes online. So there are tons of resources out there, and a lot that are that are free to access. Beyond that, though, there are a lot of programs uh, and things available at universities, as well as through other organizations, where you can focus on a specific skill and get a certification, or something like that. So if you want to learn JavaScript, for example, and you've never done that before, there are a number of ways, both through online courses as well as in-person courses, to kind of have that continued learning, and get that in a more formal capacity, if that it works for you.
Well,
And then oh,
no,
go
I was
ahead,
gonna.
Amanda.
Here's what I love about your career path. You kind of forged some of this yourself. It's your own initiative, and it was your own, seeking out to gain more skills and gain more knowledge. And I love that. And I think that it, really, people need to know that this is, you have a skill. You can create something, and these are skills that are not going to go away. They're with us, and they're evolving. And so I think that it's just such a great career path that you've chosen. But then also, you just keep learning and keep developing these skills. That's got to be pretty exciting, actually.
Yeah, yeah, and you mentioned it's a growing career path, and there really is a lot of demand for designers and design thinkers these days. There are a lot of big companies that place a big emphasis on design now, and really value designers in a way that they didn't even 5, 10 years ago, because they're realizing that designers and design processes and design thinking are a really great way to find solutions to tough problems and to create experiences that work better for their customers and their users. And a lot of these big organizations are really seeing the benefits of having a robust design practice that can come up with well reasoned and tested and creative solutions to the way that they design their interactions with their consumers.
Well, it's a super competitive field. So, constant innovation is kind of, what I assume these companies are always on the lookout for is, how can we make things easy, better, just like your current career right now when you're trying to, make things easy for a very specific user group, right? So, okay, so if you were going to give what's your best advice to someone who's looking at this career, maybe getting ready to go, to college and embark on this career? What's your best advice?
So my advice is to, let's see. I think I would encourage people to remember that there are so many possibilities and directions that you can go beyond college. So focus on a program that's going to give you a good foundational skill set, and going to prepare you to do some of those intangible things that I talked about earlier. But also be looking at the industry and what kinds of roles exist there, and do some of your own learning as well, to kind of prepare yourself for that. And on that note, internships are huge. Internships are huge for this field, because there's a lot you can learn in a classroom, but there's a ton that you can. And historically, college curriculums have had a little bit of difficulty keeping up with the industry. So you can learn a lot of those foundational skills and kind of, like I said, build that muscle for communication and critique.
Right.
But it's just as important that you are doing things like internships to get that real world exposure, and build on that university education with some real world learning as well.
Wow, Matt, you're such a great example of, let's take your strengths and let's take, what you like doing and let's pursue something that incorporates all of that. Plus, there's a very specific skill involved. And then, with Optimum Ed, we always tell our students and everyone that we work with, find an internship, go shadow with, if you think that you want to go into the medical field, go spend a day with people in the medical field and whatever field you want to go to. So I think you're just a great example of kind of seeking out all of these different opportunities. And yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. I love hearing about people's careers, how they got there, what they're doing, and I love to hear people that are just constantly learning. So I just really appreciate all of your experience. And if someone really wants to maybe connect with you and talk to you more about it, please feel free to contact Optimum Ed. I think Matt would be gracious enough to give anyone a couple of minutes of their time. Our number is 804-417-4807. I have to read that number because it's in my phone and I always just dial it from my phone. But 804-417-4807. If anyone has any questions about career path, please call us. We're here to help and be a resource. Thank you so much, Matt. It was great talking to you.
No problem. Thank you, Amanda. My pleasure.